Tonight we enter the story of God's constant love and care for us, which has a fancy theological name, salvation history. The story of how God is saving us. It's a journey that begins in darkness and moves into light. A journey from chaos, oppression, and death into order, liberation, and new life. It begins with the story of creation, where James Weldon Johnson describes the universe's origin state as a darkness blacker than 100 midnights. Johnson was a great literary figure of the Harlem Renaissance and wrote the very moving lyrics to the Black national anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing, which is helpful to remember because when he describes that black darkness, he means the kind of darkness that prevents us from seeing, where we lose our way, where danger lurks. He doesn't mean the shade of people's skin. And yet so often the darkness that impedes vision is wrongly associated with darkness of skin. On the first day of creation, God calls forth light and pushes back the primordial chaos. And with the gift of light and sight, we humans of every skin color can begin to find our way. Although the story tells us we lose it quickly. Darkness can also mean fear and uncertainty. When the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, passing from the darkness of slavery and fear into the light of freedom and faith, they must first wait in the pitch black, hearing the wind roar all night, not knowing if they will survive. The moment of their salvation occurs at dawn when the light suddenly reveals God's victory over the Egyptian army. They are free. In the Gospel of Matthew, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary arrive at the tomb in the darkness right before dawn, and in the darkness of grief that their beloved teacher is dead. At dawn, the sudden eruption of the resurrected Jesus into the world is marked by a great earthquake. The tomb's seal is broken at daybreak, symbolizing God's victory over the darkness of the grave and the finality of death. Did you know that historically the Easter Vigil was an all-nighter? That's not going to happen tonight. The congregation sat vigil for hours, waiting for the sunrise. Now, I think Pastor Sue's going to be up at sunrise. Are you doing your... They do sunrise service over at the Coastside Lutheran Church. In the early church, the congregation stayed up all night through the darkness, waiting for the sunrise. And then the new converts to Christianity were baptized right at that moment of the darkness before the dawn, right as the dark shadow of the night turned in to daybreak, and they emerged from the water just as the light broke. They were symbolically drowning their old self in the dark to be reborn into a radically new, resurrected reality into the light. Now, most of us here are already baptized. We have already drowned our old self and been reborn with Christ. And yet we return to this ritual and to this salvation history because there are times when our lives feel like the darkness of the primordial chaos. And we cannot find our way. Or when we are suffering with fear and uncertainty, waiting and hoping in the darkness for our salvation. Or when Like the women who loved Jesus, our hearts break with grief, and we wonder if we will ever know joy again. And so we come to make this journey from darkness into light, to put our faith in the story of God's saving love for us, and to listen to what the angels tell the women at the tomb. Do not be afraid. Now, I don't know about you, but I find myself advising people not to worry all the time. I tell my kids. I tell my husband. I tell some of you here at church who worry that something will go wrong during the church service not to worry. And spoiler alert, it will go wrong at Holy Family.
That's just to be expected.
It's part of our charm.
Yeah, and then there's the fact that things can always go wrong eventually.
That's right. Things will always go wrong. So we shouldn't worry, right? And most of all, I tell myself not to worry when I'm lying in bed, wide awake in the middle of the night, fretting over some uncertainty. And usually, regardless of who I'm giving this advice to, it is not helpful. It never helps to tell someone not to worry. Telling someone, do not be afraid, rarely works. If you're on an airplane experiencing turbulence and the pilot comes on the intercom and says, do not be afraid, okay, it might comfort you a little bit, but you're probably still worried. The same goes for a doctor telling you not to panic before a major surgery. You're hoping for the best, you trust the doctor, but you know there are risks. Pilots, doctors, and reassuring moms/vicars, we can't guarantee the future. We can't conquer death. But when the angels tell the women, do not be afraid, it means something different. They stand at an empty tomb. The bad thing has already happened. Jesus died. But death itself doesn't win. Do not be afraid is an invitation to live based on a whole new reality. A reality where we know with absolute certainty that no matter how dark it is, blacker than 100 midnights, the light is always on the other side. And with that light of Christ, we can never, ever lose our way. So we come here tonight hoping for the light. And we hear the angels tell us there is nothing to fear. In this new, bright, shining Easter reality. What does this mean for us? How does faith and this assurance change the way we live? Paul is teaching the new Christians of Colossae the answer to this very question in the reading that Jane read for us. The early Christians entered the baptismal waters in their birthday suits, if you know what I mean. And when they emerged in the daylight, in the resurrection life, they were wrapped in brand new clothes. They had shed the clothes of their social rank, whatever the status they had in their Roman society. They shed their allegiances and their past traumas. And they physically adopted the new uniform and new identity as part of Christ's body, the church. They were leaving behind family, status, wealth, and they were risking persecution. Surely this was only possible because they had heeded the angels and were not afraid. So Paul says to these new Christians, now that you have been raised with Christ and brought in to this new life, seek the things that are above. This Lent, we discovered here at Holy Family that Paul isn't as dualistic as he sounds. He doesn't mean to stop caring about the world. He means shifting our ultimate loyalty away from the flawed and ever-changing systems of power and wealth and status that govern the earthly realm. He means actively stomping out the forces of death in this world through actions of kindness, justice, and mercy. He means, since we have been raised with Christ, we must change how we live and how we treat others. Since we have been raised with Christ, how do we live? Since the angels have told us, do not be afraid, how do we live? Tonight we return to the story of our salvation and we reflect on our own salvation history. How did this story change you when you first heard it? If we pause for a moment on the bright side of this vigil, can you feel the fear and the great joy of Easter in your heart the way you did the first time you heard this story? Can you see your shiny, bright, baptismal identity that helps you shed earthly status and seek the things that are above? And if the darkness has gathered inside you, where do you need to let its light in tonight? What dark spaces within you can an Easter earthquake crack open with the good news? Alleluia, Christ is risen. It is always true, and yet we need to make this journey every year to remember our fear and our great joy and to let the light in.